This is a man who has built his entire identity on power, political power, financial power, and marital power. Prince Ned Nwoko, a Nigerian lawyer, politician, and businessman, known not just for his wealth, but the controversy that trails his personal life. For many Nigerians, Ned Nwoko represents the very picture of the elite patriarch, a man who lives by his own rules, untouched by public opinion. He once served as a member of the House of Representatives, but that's not what made him a household name. What made him famous or infamous was his unapologetic embrace of polygamy and the glamour attached to it. And in his own words, he sees nothing wrong with it. During an interview with Channels TV, Ned Nwoko compared monogamy to standing on one leg. He said, "Just imagine telling you to stand on one foot. You know how difficult it is, but to stand on 2-3 foot is much more balanced." He goes further to say, "I'm sorry for those who have only one wife. It's difficult to stand on one leg alone." Then, confidently with no hint of doubt, he added, "I would do it again, and again." At face value, it sounds like a man simply proud of his culture and beliefs. But when you listen closely, you begin to hear something deeper, something psychological. His entire ideology around women and marriage is built on control and balance. His balance. He likens multiple wives to stability, but it's a stability that revolves around him. There's no room in this metaphor for the woman's emotional balance, her choice, or her freedom. And that's where the contradiction begins to surface. Ned Nwoko sees himself as a man in control, the pillar, the foundation, the very center of it all. But beneath that, we start to see a fragile ego, a man who hides his vulnerability behind culture and tradition, using polygamy as both a shield and a statement. This idea that one man can find balance through the possession of multiple women is not just cultural, it's deeply psychological. It speaks to the mindset of a man who fears losing control, who defines his stability by how many people orbit around him. A man who doesn't see polygamy as a choice, but as a necessity to maintain dominance. And yet, as we'll see in later parts, the same man who boasts of strength and balance begins to unravel when one of his wives, the most famous of them all, Regina Daniels, starts to slip away from his grip. Because what happens when the leg that holds your balance begins to walk away? Ned's philosophy sounds confident, almost poetic. A man with one wife stands on one leg, but a man with several stands on many, and therefore is stable. It's the kind of metaphor that sounds wise until you really stop to think about it. Because what exactly does stability mean in this context? And more importantly, stability for who? If this theory of many legs truly defines balance, then shouldn't the same logic be applied to women too? Shouldn't a woman be allowed to marry 3 or 4 men so she can stand on many legs and be stable as well? Of course, society would never accept that, and Ned himself would probably never suggest it. So his metaphor doesn't just reveal his belief in polygamy, it exposes a deeper psychological framework, one rooted in patriarchal entitlement, a system where men are permitted to multiple options in the name of stability, but women are expected to stay still, loyal, and grateful. In Ned's world, stability seems to be measured by how much control a man has over a woman, not by emotional balance or mutual respect. And this is where the paradox begins, because beneath the image of power lies something else entirely: dependence, emotional dependence, the kind of attachment that drives him to prove again and again that he is in control, even when his actions say otherwise. For years, Ned Nwoko was known but not recognized, a wealthy politician, a lawyer, a man of influence, but his name was lived mostly within the cycles of power and privilege, not in the hearts of the public. Then came Regina Daniels, young, beautiful, famous, a rising star in Nollywood, whose every move was watched, celebrated, and sometimes judged. And in 2019, when their marriage became public, something changed. not just for Regina, but for Ned himself. Suddenly his relevance multiplied. Search his name online, and on the spouse, you don't see the list of wives that came before her. You only see one, Regina Daniels, married 2019. It's as though the world began counting his legacy from the moment she entered his life. She became the jewel that amplified his image, the proof that he could command not only power and wealth, but youth and beauty. But in that same moment, something subtle happened. The lines of control blurred. Because while he may have viewed Regina as his prize, she also became the source of his validation. His public identity, his fame, even his pride became intertwined with her presence. For a man who only measured stability by the number of women he had, this was something different. Regina was not just another wife, she was his mirror. Through her, he saw himself as powerful, desirable, timeless. Through her, he found an audience that validated his image, one far larger and louder than politics ever could. But with that validation came a quiet dependency. And that dependency would later expose a side of Ned Nwoko the world had never seen. A man who's no longer driven by dominance but by fear. Fear of losing not just the wife, but the very thing that made him matter. But with dependency comes scrutiny. The more Ned's identity became tied to Regina's, the more people began to ask, what would happen if she walked away? Could she ever leave a man like him? It was in the space of curiosity and speculation that a story began to circulate, one that would blur the line between tradition, culture, and myth. People began to claim that Regina had taken an oath, a binding ritual within the Anioma tradition that ensured she could never leave Ned. Suddenly, the narrative of the powerful, untouchable patriarch gained a mystical layer, one that promised control beyond mere wealth or influence. In the world of social media and rumor, nothing captures the imagination more than the idea of a binding oath. And in the case of Ned Nwoko and Regina Daniels, the story was irresistible. According to circulating beliefs, Regina Daniels had taken an Anioma oath, a mystical pledge, a spiritual lock that ensured she could never leave Ned. It was a narrative that perfectly fits the image of a husband, so powerful, so in control that even the supernatural seemed to obey his will. Delta State traditions, it was said, reinforced this idea. Bride price could not be returned, meaning that a Delta man's marriage was in a sense permanent. Social media amplified the story. One tweet read, "It's obvious Regina Daniels doesn't understand what she signed up for. They know the divorced Delta man, except now him using hands say he no do again. If not, you are locked for life. You can't return the bride price of a Delta man. Ask around." To the casual observer, this framed Ned as untouchable, the man in complete control. Regina could acquire multi-million naira mansions in Lagos, travel by private jet, or become a global figure. But the belief went, she could never leave him. Yet behind the mythology, the cracks begin to show. Because if these oaths were real, if this binding ritual truly secured the marriage, why does Ned, the man supposedly in total control, act anything but secure? Why do we see him maneuvering, negotiating, even orchestrating narratives to ensure Regina Daniels remains close? This is the psychological paradox. The man whose authority should be absolute, whose power is codified in culture, tradition, and rumor, is now a man who appears anxious, protective, and emotionally invested. If the oath was real, why was the man who held all the power suddenly acting like he was losing it? And that is the point where myth begins to unravel. Just as the world marveled at the supposed mystical bond between Ned Nwoko and Regina Daniels, a voice emerged, one that challenged the narrative. From the heart of Delta State itself, a woman born in Ibuzo, near Regina and Ned's community, clarified the truth. According to her, what Regina did was simply part of normal traditional rites of the Ndi Anioma people. There was nothing resembling an oath. Regina did not take any oath. She's not bound by any supernatural agreement, and she's free to leave the marriage or choose any other man she wants. All the fears circulating online that she would remain celibate for life or be unable to remarry were merely speculations. The marriage followed customary practices, a traditional way of marrying women into the kingdom and the village, nothing more. Social media as usual has amplified stories, but the reality was simple. Regina was never under a binding oath, never constrained by rituals, and had the freedom to make her own choices. Psychologically, this revelation is key. The control was imagined, yet Ned's fear of losing Regina, of losing his relevance, of losing his prize was very real. The meat of the oath may have existed in the minds of the public, but in Ned's mind, the stakes were really high. He faced a situation where tradition did not protect him, only his actions and emotions could. With the reality laid bare, that Regina was never bound by oath, never constrained by tradition, the perceived control evaporated. Yet Ned's response reveals something not everyone might see. A man who believed he might lose his prize. A man whose pride could not shield him from the fear of losing relevance, validation, and the woman at the center of his world. It is in this climate of fear and uncertainty that Ned made an unusual choice that allowed the world to witness a side of him rarely seen. In a move that surprised many, Ned allowed the journalist into the intimate spaces of his home. For a man known for privacy, security, and a proud polygamous persona, this was unusual, almost uncharacteristic. Through the lens of the camera, we witnessed a narrative carefully curated, yet emotionally revealing. The journalist walks viewers through their marriage, highlighting a life that outwardly appears happy and complete. She speaks of Regina's 5 houses, the luxury, the travel, the children, Moon and Khalifa, all presented as evidence that Regina had been loved, provided for, and valued. But beneath the surface, it becomes clear Ned is speaking through her. The words, the framing, the emphasis on care, protection, and provision is as though he's crafting a message for Regina without breaking his masculine pride by directly appealing. She tells viewers that a mother who truly loves her children would stay with them, subtly guilt-tripping Regina while reinforcing the idea of Ned as the devoted husband. This doesn't look like a performance for the public alone. Psychologically, it reads as desperation and vulnerability. A man who publicly projects the image of a proud polygamist, able to marry many wives, independent, untouchable, is here clutching at straws to reclaim what he values most. Why does this matter? Because Regina has openly accused him of domestic violence. In another context, a man with his pride and wealth might sever ties with her, to protect his image. After all, he could marry as many wives as he wanted. But Ned doesn't do that. He wants her back. He needs her for relevance, for validation, perhaps even for love, or a complex mix of all three. The journalist's visit crystallizes this paradox. Ned Nwoko, the patriarch, the polygamist, the man who stands on multiple legs, is humanized in a moment of clear vulnerability. Through carefully crafted narratives, subtle guilt-tripping, and strategic revelations, we see a man who is desperate, not just to maintain control, but to maintain a connection that anchors his very identity. It is here, in this carefully orchestrated yet psychologically transparent scene, that we witness the true weight of his dependence, not on tradition, not on superstition, but on the woman who made him relevant. Even after opening his home and letting the journalist convey his emotions, Ned faced another test, a viral rumor claiming he had taken a 7th wife. For a man whose public persona thrives on polygamy, one more wife should have been trivial, another leg for balance. But this time, he did not let it pass. He issued a vehement denial, even threatening legal action against those spreading the claim. The intensity of his response reveals something very deep. This wasn't just about protecting reputation. Psychologically again, it reads like a message aimed squarely at Regina Daniels. Don't believe the stories. I haven't replaced you. You still have your place. For a man who embraces the freedom of marrying multiple women, this was a startling contradiction. The proud polygamist suddenly behaved like a monogamous husband, desperate to maintain his connection with a woman who defines both his personal life and public relevance. This episode reinforces what we have been seeing. a man clutching at straws, carefully orchestrating narratives and attempting to shape perception, not for the public, but for the one person who truly matters to him. After the denial, after the careful orchestration of narratives through journalists and family albums, we step back to ask, who is Ned Nwoko beneath all the wealth, titles, and wives? The man who once compared polygamy to standing on multiple legs, claiming stability through numbers, is now revealed to be wobbling on even 4 legs. His wealth, fame, and status have not shielded him from the insecurity that Regina's departure provokes. The contradictions are stark. The journalist brought in to convey his emotions indirectly, the vehement denial of a 7th wife, all point to a man who fears irrelevance more than loneliness. Regina Daniels, the woman who made him widely known, whose presence tied his public image to private life, has become the axis of his world. Losing her threatens his balance more than losing any other wife ever could. This is the man beneath the myth, a proud, polygamous, seemingly untouchable figure, yet profoundly vulnerable when faced with the possibility of losing the one person who ensures his relevance and emotional anchoring. In the end, this isn't just about polygamy, power, or public perception. It's about the fragile human psychology behind a man who appears invincible and what happens when the person who grounds him begins to slip away.